right. I'm so happy to have Woody Witt on the Everything Saxophone podcast. Now, if you don't know him, this man has done so much. He has been a leader or co-leader of 13 or on 13 CDs. He's appeared as a sideman on 50 or so recordings, played with so many people. He's a saxophonist, he's an educator, he's a composer. We have a lot to dive into today, especially he's got a new etude book called Stream of Consciousness that I think is really exciting. So welcome to the podcast, Woody.
Thank you, Donna. It's my pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So I want to start off with, because people may not know, who you are or where you came from or your beginnings. So how did you get started with music? Because a lot of times when I interview people, it's not always starting on the saxophone.
Yeah, for me, I came from a musical family. My dad played guitar, amateur and semi-professional. And I'm sorry about that. Um, and my mother, she played trombone in high school in marching band, and my oldest sister studied piano and organ. So there was always music around. And I started playing clarinet first in fourth grade, and I really didn't like it. It was kind of miserable, and I didn't have a private teacher or anything. It was just, music program, elementary school. I was never one to, I was always a good student and all, but I ended up cutting out of music class
Oh,
early
wow.
on.
Okay.
I didn't really like my experience. And I decided during that time, it's like I was interested in the saxophone.
Okay.
So, which surprises me that my parents supported me at that point, and they got me an alto. And the next year, I started playing saxophone, and I really took to that. And I started taking lessons, I think in sixth grade, maybe seventh grade at a music store. But I was mostly, kind of self-taught or, coming up through a band program, getting instruction from a teacher. There were various teachers in Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh, that's really
And,
okay.
and I went through and I started, hearing music. I was curious about music. The saxophone really clicked for me. And when I got to high school, I went to an all-boys college prep school. And as you can imagine, there's not a whole lot of like high woodwind players or people like that. So my band director asked, various people to play other wind instruments. So I went back to the clarinet. And all the way through high school, I played clarinet, and I ended up being the principal clarinet player in my high school band. At the same time, I was also playing saxophone and jazz band and marching.
Oh, so wait, hold on. So you went back to it. Did you want to do that? I mean, were you okay with it at that point?
Well, it was I was a good strong saxophone player by the time I got to high school, and I guess out of the crop of students that were there, I had experience playing other winds. So since there were no players on those instruments, the director, asked people to play clarinet, flute, oboe, piccolo. And, so I just ended up going back to clarinet to help out in band, but I was still playing saxophone
Okay.
while I was in a marching band and jazz band. So doubling was like just a part of what I had to do.
Okay. Okay. No resentment there. Hopefully.
No, no, I enjoyed it. I mean, and now I'm really thankful that I had that kind of experience because as I'm sure you know, as a saxophonist, a lot of times we get called to play, maybe with a big band or to do a show or something like that, and doubles are like a necessity. I mean, if I show you what I've got sitting here in the room, I've got a flute and a clarinet sitting out and a clamped up tenor. My saxes are kind of put away, but my clarinet and flute are out.
Right, right. How, and let me go into left field for 1 second. So how often do you practice those other instruments? You're tripling. You're not even just doubling. You're tripling.
Well, right now I've got a show with Houston Symphony this weekend, backing up a vocalist named Tony DeSerre, and I'm playing lead alto, and I've got to play all doubles. So this week I've been doing, tone studies on flute and basic scales on clarinet, just kind of getting sound together and preparing myself. And today I took out my alto so I could do a little comparison. I've got a very wide assortment of mouthpieces and such, and I wanted to kind of hone in on what I wanted to use this week.
Okay, we're going to get into that in a few minutes. Let me go back to now. Let me bring it back to so in high school, you're playing saxophone, you're playing clarinet, and what made you decide to go the route of music?
But that's a great question. Since I went to a college prep school, it was kind of expected. It's a very, very strong STEM field, science, technology, engineering, math. And I did well in those subjects. And my dad was kind of encouraging me to go into engineering. Yet I was very interested in music, and I made all state when I was in high school and was participated in various, like honor bands and things like that. And I practiced pretty relentlessly as a high school student. I was doing a lot of ear playing, playing along with records, and just trying to figure things out. And um, so I was thinking I might go into something that was related to like audio engineering, but I didn't know anything about that at that time. So when I went to college, I had a strong academic scholarship, and I went in as an engineering major and came to Texas. And the first thing I noticed was like how strong the band programs were, and all these great musicians that were around. And I was really excited about playing, and I had a scholarship to be in the band as well as an academic scholarship. So after not even a year, I switched my major to music,
Mm.
and I was really behind because I didn't come up in a program like a lot of the programs that we have here in Texas. I wasn't a real strong sight reader, even though I had good technique. I was very much an ear player more than anything. Um, and I had to do a lot of work to get caught up. So my private instructor at University of Houston was predominantly a clarinetist, and was also a saxophonist. And I started working very, very hard developing my reading skills, and uh, I didn't even know what classical saxophone was at that point. And in the over the course of several years, about 10 years, I dedicated a lot of time to studying classical saxophone repertoire and that approach to the instrument, while I was also playing jazz and studying that like on the side on my own.
Wow. Okay. There's a lot to unpack here for sure. Okay. Let me ask this question. So, you're in high school, you're playing clarinet and saxophone. You mentioned with saxophone, you did a lot of like learning by ear, figuring things out, all that kind of thing, probably listening to favorite players and stuff like that. Which, by the way, who were you listening to? Who were you transcribing?
Well, that's interesting because I didn't really start off with, like transcription early on. I would just put on whatever I heard. I wasn't even, no, I didn't have jazz around me at home. So I heard various recordings, but there was a great jazz radio station in Omaha at the time. So I started listening to it. The first jazz album I bought was Blue Train.
Okay.
And the first transcription that I tried to do was Giant Steps. And
Lordy.
and but before one that I actually took off by ear. And at the point that I did that, my ear was pretty well developed, so I was able to, kind of put it together. But I had found a transcription book of solos on off of the recording on Blue Train. I don't remember who did the book, but I found this book, and I wore out that record. I had a record. I have the LP hanging on my wall over here. And I just wore out that record listening to it and trying to figure out how do you get a sound like that on the tenor, because he had Coltrane had such a unique sound, and his sound was baffling to me. It's like I played the tenor, but I didn't have a sound that matched his sound.
Mm.
But I was playing along like with records of Chuck Mangione. I listened to Chris Vidala, who
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't know, but I actually met Chris. I think I was maybe 15, 16 years old, and Chuck Mangione was one of the first concerts I saw in Omaha at the Orpheum, and I saw Grover Washington Jr.
Oh yeah.
Playing with his own band, and I think Pieces of a Dream was the band. It was his backup band, and I heard him play, and I had the album Wine Light, and I would like play along with these records and try to grab ideas and phrases, but I wasn't getting a whole lot of guidance from people on what to do. I was just doing it on my own.
Got it. And do you feel, in looking back in retrospect, doing all that kind of by ear work, do you think that that benefited you to be able to, in any way, like to help you read better? Not just, I don't even want to just say jazz stuff. I mean, classically too.
But that's a really good question. I became an obsessive transcriber. Fast forward, say 4 or 5 years, like when I was doing my undergraduate work, finishing my undergraduate work, and my reading was pretty strong at that point. Well, I between finishing my undergraduate degree and doing my master's degree at University of North Texas, I went there to do my master's in jazz studies. And in that 3 or 4 month period between finishing my undergraduate was in classical performance. So I was playing like, what did I play? I played the Ingolf Dahl Concerto and Mozart Bassoon Concerto, a transcription of it on saxophone, and I played a pretty extensive program. After that, and at the same time I was doing this, I was like playing gigs. I was subbing for some pros in town and going to jam sessions. So I was in school studying classical saxophone and playing classical music, but I was also playing jazz, but I wasn't doing a jazz degree. So I was very excited about getting to go to UNT and pursue jazz. I transcribed 23 Sonny Stitt solos in the span of that summer.
Oh my gosh.
All I did was stay at home and basically in my pajamas and with a reel-to-reel tape deck, listening to recordings to Sonny Stitt, slowing it down to half speed, picking them up and picking them off and writing them out on manuscript paper. And through that, from that period forward, I don't know how many transcriptions I've done. I've done probably, I don't know, 120, 130 transcriptions, ranging from Michael Brecker to George Coleman to Bob Berg to piano players. I transcribed McCoy Tyner and Mulgrew Miller, and we try to like play some of these things on saxophone. And I bring all that up because you asked about reading. When I had to notate these solos and figure out the rhythms and everything, I found that my sight reading and reading skills became much stronger. Because it wasn't just about like recognizing rhythms, but it's like I heard the music. Because I got to a point where when I would transcribe, I wouldn't use my instrument, which I know is like kind of unconventional. I would sit there with staff paper and earphones and write out what I was hearing.
That's great.
And it got to the point where when I would hear anybody, especially on saxophone, I could just hear whatever they played. Heard the notes. It felt like I had perfect pitch, but it was, very strong, a relative pitch and timbral recognition. So I could hear any note that someone would play and just know what it is. From doing all of that transcribing and listening. It's just like intensive ear training.
Yeah.
So now I feel like when I am sight reading something, it's like I pre-hear the music. I look at it, I really hear it, and I play all different types of music now. I mean, I'm a jazz artist, of course, and dedicated to that. But I teach classical saxophone, and I have a lot of students that are band oriented. They want to become band directors themselves. So I'm dealing with classical repertoire a lot. And I approach that music in the same way. It's like, listening to, I try to pre-hear what's there. I study the music and try to understand the contents of what's there. Understanding. I've written out like cheat sheets or notes. I've done music of Ida Gutkovsky, who was a student of Olivier Messiaen, and she used like Messiaen modes as a basis for her music. I've written out like scale sheets from concerti and things like that, and would practice the scales to get the sounds in my ear, not just playing like the passages that are in the music, because I really wanted to like absorb the material.
Wow.
I
And
know I feel like I'm going all over the place, but you got me talking about this stuff and it's just got me thinking.
yeah, no, that's good. And that's the whole point. I want this to be, like a conversation, and it is. And this is actually really fascinating because the way you're approaching classical music, like you're deep diving into that in a definitely in a different way. When it comes to classical music, I'm sure you've listened to a whole bunch of recordings of pieces that have the recordings and stuff. When it comes to new works, then it sounds like this is the type of thing that you're doing to get into the new works.
Definitely, well, definitely with new works. If I'm studying something that hasn't been recorded or played, even if it has been recorded, I try to dive into the music more on my own and study it because again, I feel like I want to know the music closely because as a quote classical artist or if we're a musician and we're interpreting someone else's music, the idea is to be able to present what the composer intended,
Yeah.
right? So I feel it's my responsibility to understand that music as intimately as I can. I mean, when I'm an improviser or as a jazz artist, I'm dealing with you might have a sketch. It might be something really basic, or it might be, a tune with a chord progression. And we as a jazz artist, we study the chord progression. I play piano. I'll work through the chord changes on the piano to understand how they relate. So it's kind of like marrying those two uh, or this philosophy to these different styles. It's all just music, right? I mean, whether it's classical music, jazz, or something else, it's just music. So I feel like that kind of study is just as important as the time spent doing repetitions, playing passages, and getting it under my fingers. I want the music in my mind, in my ear, in my body, and then it comes out of my fingers.
That's a great, first of all, such a great description because I think the key point here, a couple of key points. Number one, this didn't happen overnight. What happened was not realizing this when you were younger, you were listening and whether you were writing them out or not, but you learned by ear. You listened to things, you were curious about things, you figured them out, and you got strong with your ears. And then when you went to college, especially since it's classical music, you felt that there was a deficiency with your reading, so you worked hard on that. That's one theme I'm seeing here too, just really working hard. But I don't. How do I want to word this? When I say working hard, I don't mean like it's like like a drudgery. Like you're finding different ways of working hard. You're finding ways to dive deeper into the music, and it doesn't matter the style. And it's not like it's classical, so you have to work on it this way, and it's jazz and you have to work on it this way. Like you said, you're marrying the philosophy of how you're working on things, regardless of the style, and it doesn't happen overnight. It took time to develop the ears for sure. And what's really interesting too, you referred this a couple of times, this pre-hearing, this, because you've done all this listening and trying to figure things out, that's what's helped to develop the pre-hearing in your head so that when you improvise, right, you can much more easily play what you hear in your head, compared to someone who's just maybe reading something for the first time or, hasn't done as much ear work or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And you say all that, and it makes me think about the book that we're going to talk about. And really, the book is a product of teaching. I don't know if I clearly explain it in the notes on there, but I've taught improvisation for a long time, and I early on I was kind of interested in writing. I would write out solos on tunes, and as I did it, I was trying to hear what I would write. So those etudes in that most of the etudes, not all of them. There are a couple of them that are in there that are kind of ridiculous that were written for the sake of like expanding my technique or something like that. But most of them that are standards based, they're all standards based, but most of them that are more conventional, I wrote those in a way that it was like I heard the notes. This is the philosophy. If I've got a student that's got a strong enough ear and they understand harmony, I would like them to be able to write a chorus on a tune and try to write it like real time. Don't go back and do it like a composition. Don't think about it and rethink it. Write it like you're going to play it. And then pick up your instrument and play it. And does it reflect what you heard? And like the more I've done that, I feel like it's helped my ear to become stronger. So I didn't even write these etudes with the idea of a book coming out. I wrote them as an outgrowth of working with students because I would have a student do one and I would do one too. So we're working on like There'll Never Be Another You. It's like, okay, write a chorus and bring it next week. Well, 5, 10 minutes before their lesson, I would write out a chorus too. And then it's like, okay, let hear you play yours. I'm going to play mine. Now let's look at both of them and let's play them both. And let's kind of compare what's here. Let's figure out what works, what sounds good, what doesn't work, and have them judge like, were you successful? Did you really hear? Did it sound like what you expected it to sound like or not?
And
And in a lot of cases, students may not have their ear developed to that point yet.
yeah.
So I have a lot of those etudes, so I decided to kind of put a few of them together into a book format, and I've been sitting on this thing for like years and finally put it out.
Oh, okay, got it. And you know what? And your book is called Stream of Consciousness, and let's go down here for a second now because this makes total sense based on so far what you've talked about, the way that you've taught yourself, and the way you've taught yourself to listen, and the way you've taught yourself to pre-hear, so to speak. And then when you're playing, you got it to the point where it is a stream of consciousness, and that's what a perfect title. What an absolutely perfect title for that. And what's really interesting too, there are a lot of teachers that teach students to write out solos, not with the directions that you're taking, though. It's a little different. What I found, though, is that when students do that, when they write out solos, they get hooked or stuck on, oh my gosh, I've got to write out a solo so that, I can't improvise. I have to write it out because I just don't trust my improvisation. But you're
Yeah.
approaching this differently. Have you had that kind of situation come up and how have you dealt with it?
Yes. I mean, I've had students who get hung up on it and well, I think a lot of that, the hangups come, well, one, it can come from not having the ear developed
Yeah.
enough. So they're really not hearing it. And it's not just pitches, it can also be rhythm.
Oh, for
You know,
sure.
they don't have a good sense of time or rhythm. Well, not time. Their time might be fine and they can read well, but they can't translate what they hear in onto the paper. So the work that I did in doing all this transcription really helped me, I think, in preparation for doing this kind of work, that it comes out fairly naturally. Um, but I think also we get hung up, all of us, in judging what we write, from standpoint of being a composer, judging whether or not it's good, in and doing it in the process instead of just letting it come out. So my point in writing these etudes was not to overthink what's there. Don't sit and judge and tell yourself that this doesn't sound good. Let's worry about that later. Just play it, write it out, play it. Now let's see, how does it sound? Okay, this works, this doesn't work. And then by doing that process and continuing to do it, we become better. We become stronger. We become more aware of rhythm or more pitch conscious, more aware of, targeting chord tones or including certain ideas, incorporating melody in there. A huge influence on me and my way of thinking was Lee Konitz. I never got the pleasure of studying with Lee. I met Lee by chance in New York a number of years ago up at Roberto's shop. He was in there practicing, and I was like, he's one of my idols. Just what a brilliant improviser. But he influenced me before I knew him because I think it was a Bay Area saxophonist, Mel Martin, who maybe studied with Lee at one point, and there was an article that was in a Saxophone Journal a number of years ago and talked about like this 10-step method to improvisation. And it started with like playing the first chorus of a song, like unadorned, playing the melody, very basic, and playing it at a slow tempo. And from chorus to chorus, each chorus like adding a little bit more, a little more embellishment, but it was working from the melody. And several of my etudes are there. I don't have it like highlighted in the etude, but like I incorporate melody tones like within there. If you played the melody behind it, you would hear the melody very much in the line that's played. And that came from Lee Konitz. It came from that article. I remember vividly practicing after I read that article, thinking, well, how hard is this? And just started. I think I started, the first tune I did was "Have You Met Miss Jones," and I'm trying to play through the tune with a metronome on it, like quarter note equal to 70 or something, and just keeping my place in the tune and going through it. It really became like a mental exercise, a focus exercise. And I ended up having to go a little bit quicker. But over time, as my ear became more developed and my focus became more developed, I found I could, play these songs slower. And as I practiced the melody from the standpoint of playing the melody became much more deeply entrenched in me. And for me, that's something when I'm in that mode of practicing, where I'm practicing tunes, I often work on playing unaccompanied or with a metronome, or maybe using like an app like Drum Genius or something, and just playing through the tune for a long period of time. And each chorus, I might be doing something a little bit different. But often starting with the starting point being making sure the melody is in place. And then after the melody is in place, thinking about my improvisation as being an extension of the melody, trying to incorporate the melody into my playing. Because I think, and I'm sorry if I'm talking too much. I know
This is
I'm
great.
throwing a lot out there. Um, I think, and I'm going to offer my opinion. I think a lot of players that come up now, I hear players that have, amazing technique and control and all this kind of stuff together, but uh, it's like it can sound kind of vacuous or empty. It's like I hear a lot of notes and impressive things, but I think, how does this relate to the song? And I believe that this is an area where we may have lost audiences. That
Okay.
audiences maybe don't even connect with what we're playing because they don't hear the connection. Um, I think there's a reason that people continue to go back and listen to recordings of the masters like Lester Young or Coleman Hawkins or Lee Konitz. I mean, they really knew songs and they played songs and they also were entertained. They knew that the importance of entertainment, and that was a part of what they did when they presented music. And it's a different mentality now, I think, with a lot of younger people.
Yeah, let's go into that for a second. Really great insights here for sure. Do you, and I know because you teach, you're a professor, you're instructor of saxophone at one university, you're a professor at another, in Houston. Um, do you feel that with the students coming in, the effects of, I'm going to say it actually, the effects of like social media, the effects of needing a like, needing those likes has had an effect on their playing in the sense that they're these some of these younger players are really incredible technically and all that kind of thing, but they're prioritizing technique over, I guess focusing on the melodic aspects of the song.
Yeah. I think I mean not to slight anyone because I think there's some incredible players that are coming up that get a lot of attention and are deserving of it. But it's one thing to sound good for 60 seconds. It's a
Um,
whole other thing to sound good for 4 hours.
mm,
It's another thing to learn to call a set. It's another thing to learn to work with musicians and blend and play in an ensemble. And there are oftentimes, I'm a very busy performer. I mean, in spite of all my teaching, I was just working on my taxes, and I did 190 dates this past year,
mm,
which is slower for me than what it has been, but I'm still actively playing. And I work in a lot of different settings, from playing with the symphony. And when I play with the symphony playing, jazz, but I've also played, like bolero and other classical pieces and worked with them in that setting, and that's completely different. And I lead my own big band, I lead my own small group. I oftentimes work with vocalists. You're playing in a restaurant. People don't want to hear you shred for, you know, an hour or 2 hours. It's like sometimes all that is really needed is that you play the melody with a beautiful sound and in tune and expressively. And I cannot overstate the importance of being able to do that. Um, I think it really does help inform my musical being. I mean, it's very important.
yeah, and in talking about like the melody, the melody informing your practice and stuff like that, I'm curious when you first started working on songs and that kind of thing, you also, I'm going to make an assumption, I probably shouldn't though, but you dove deep into the song. Probably also dove deep into the lyrics too, and how the lyrics related, or no?
I have done some, and I've certainly had that stressed to me. And the more I've worked with vocalists, the more attuned to lyrics I've become.
Yeah.
And yes, but I haven't gone so far as making it uh, where I'm necessarily singing the song uh, on my own or saying the lyrics, but I have read the lyrics or listened to great singers, interpret melody. That's often the best resource for me in learning a song is listening to a vocalist,
Yeah.
especially listening to someone like Frank Sinatra
Yeah. Yeah.
who who was one moment. Frank Sinatra, one of the reasons I bring Frank Sinatra up is he knew the lyrics so well. And when he sang, you could really get a sense of the meaning of the song. Plus, the way that he delivers the lyric, it's like, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And having been on the stage with people like I worked with Tony Bennett, like, I don't know, two, three, four times, Johnny Mathis, these great, great, great singers, hearing them sing melodies of songs that I've played, it's been earth-shattering, really, because it makes me think about how I should play that song when I hear them sing.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, you mentioned Frank Sinatra. But like when I was growing up, I couldn't listen to older music. I just couldn't. But my
Yeah.
appreciation for him and for others, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, came later. Then I started to appreciate them, and I think that I just wanted to say that, but in with regard to like younger students coming up and stuff like that right now, you know, with the social media influence being under a minute, all that kind of thing, I think also they feel pressured too. I think they feel pressured to shred for under a minute because that's what they think they need to do in order to get an audience.
I feel the same pressure. I do. I mean, I go on and I see people play and see what they're posting, and then I think, how am I going to make something interesting to fit into 60 seconds?
Yeah.
Or, and I think the most obvious thing is you got to like shock people. And, it has to be like you grab them immediately. There's like no wasted time.
Yeah.
Well, I, the music is something that unfolds, especially improvisation. It's something that unfolds in time. And 60 seconds, yeah, you could theoretically make something interesting happen in 60 seconds. But some of my favorite recordings, people make things happen over 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
Listen
Yeah.
to like John Coltrane play or something, playing impressions and it's like it might take him 4 or 5 minutes to get to the point where the solo is like the whole band is like up underneath him and it's like roaring. But it like takes time because he's not concerned, obviously, about 60 seconds. He's not thinking about time at all. He's
Yeah.
thinking about, would assume was thinking about just being in the moment and playing with these incredible musicians and making music. Now, the motivation is I need likes, I need to grab people's attention. So it's like a whole bunch of people shouting, look at me, listen to me, pay attention to me. And unfortunately, the more likes people get, then the more attention they get. And maybe they end up getting opportunities because of that. And it seems very much out of order in a way. It, I still don't really know what to make of it all.
Yeah, let me ask you that question then, because you're teaching in college, university, do you how do you handle that with your students? Do you find some of the students that come in, they have that kind of mentality and, do you point that out in a sense that look, it's not that we're saying that this is wrong or anything like that. This is just the way the times are right now. That's the bottom line, that's what social media has trained us to do. But I'm just thinking out loud, also showing them that John Coltrane playing impressions, Sonny Rollins developing a solo, and not just one chorus. It's like over the song, which may have 20 choruses or something like that. Jimmy Heath developing a solo, you know. Jamie Aebersold's idea in the Red Book, right? This is how you build a solo, like a story, where and the analogy I'm thinking about in my head actually is kind of funny, where I feel we all feel that pressure when we put like videos out and stuff like that, but especially I see this for the younger people. It's more like, okay, I've got to put like a horror movie kind of effect right away, like that grab them, that scare them, because that's what I have to do because the algorithm pushes me to do that. How do you, do you ever talk about that with your students? Do you, how would you address something like that, or do you, or are you able to?
I I think I have addressed it more around the edges. I don't think I've addressed it directly. And I say that because most of the time when I'm dealing with my students, and I'll just say like at the university in particular, because those students are, um, for the most part, more driven, they're following like a degree in music and wanting a career in music. Whereas sometimes at community college, I might have students that are like that. I have some, but I also have a lot of maybe adult hobbyists and people like that. Or I get someone on the other extreme who's like a professional who's coming in to just work with me, and they already understand all this very well. Um, I've had to address it just in terms with like who they listen to and what they listen to.
Okay.
Like I've noticed that a lot of students, they come in and they're talking about whoever is really popular on social media. Like, oh, have you checked out so and so? And it's like, yeah, but I said, do you understand who influenced this person? Do you know where this person came from? Do you realize that this person is like, okay, if you're impressed with this, you need to go back and listen to this and this and this. And I had that put on me early on too, because when I got into jazz, I didn't listen from the beginning forward. I didn't study it chronologically. I jumped in for some reason with John Coltrane and was just like magnetized by that. And it took a long time for me to really be able to truly appreciate Ben Webster, Lester Young, and what they were doing and how uh, amazing that was and different.
Yeah.
Uh, and the fact that they're all playing the same instrument and have such like personal sounds.
Yeah.
Um, so I've addressed it that way. I would like to be able to address it more. Uh, Indirectly, I've addressed it, I guess. I have posted short videos on Instagram, but a lot of the videos that I've posted are of like complete songs, or maybe it's an excerpt just of a solo. And maybe I'll put like a 2-minute solo, but I've posted, 8, 9 minute videos. They don't do very well because they probably get, people probably listen to like 20 seconds of it. But if there's someone who's motivated, maybe they'll dig a little bit deeper and they'll listen to the track. Um, I think this is a statement of like just how we are as a society, that
About to
people
say that.
don't have that patience. This music, speaking of jazz, it really requires like patience
Yeah.
in learning it, in listening to it, in
Yeah.
appreciating it, and in playing. I mean, I'm still learning about that, and I'm 54 years old.
Yeah, okay, this I was thinking exactly what you were saying as you were saying it. And I'm thinking to myself, like I just recently interviewed Victor Goines, from Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, and he was just so incredible. And one thing, he said that was really interesting. I think of live performances as being in front of a crowd and drawing off the energy. But what he said was really interesting. Kids coming up today, their thought of a live performance is playing for a video, playing for Instagram, playing for YouTube. And that, I don't know, it was so obvious, but it surprised me, because I'm just, I know for me, just playing for the camera, it's that takes a lot of energy to get inspired to do that. I'm used to the audience interacting and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to say that, but I wanted to also turn this to, you mentioned the audience. Have you noticed a difference in the audience's attention when you're playing live? Like, let's say now compared to 10, maybe 15 years ago.
Yes, I have. I ran a club for about 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Saison. It was a jazz club in Houston, and I booked the music there, and I played there often. And it was a small room, seated about 55 people. And when I first started working there, it was really incredible. I mean, there were fans of it was a listening. It was a very special place. It was kind of like playing in someone's living room. I
Hmm.
mean, the piano, I would often set my drink on the patron's table right in front of me.
Wow.
I was right at their table. So you could play, I mean, it affected the way you would play dynamically. I mean, if I would sometimes apologize if they're sitting right in front of me. I said, I hope I don't offend you or get you wet at some point. You know, you're right in front of me. Just so you know, you're like right in the line of fire. But they were there, and people would come and they would listen and experience the music, and it continued to do that. But I would also often find people come in and later they're listening but maybe not. They might be like there with their phone, holding their phone up, shooting video,
Yeah, yeah.
like like be in the moment. You don't have to record, everything doesn't have to be documented that way.
Yeah.
Uh, there's
Yeah.
something about just truly being present as an audience member and as a performer. And I find that to be distracting too, like trying to record video content. You're always thinking about, oh, should I record this gig or this set or and then what am I and then as you're doing it, it's like it affects you up here. It's like there's the camera's on. I got to play well for the camera so that I get a nice clip to post to Instagram.
Absolutely. And am I in the camera? I tend to move when I play, so
Yeah.
you're seeing like the rest of the band and I'm over here, and that kind of thing too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because you're right, because it's interesting because ever since the advent of phones, especially with the iPhone and stuff like that, we've trained ourselves to be more ADHD, and not as focused. And so I'm just thinking aloud too, because in terms of audiences and stuff like that, they start to picture us as background noise. And even at like a concert and stuff, there's still, like where you'd think there'd be, be fairly quiet so you can like listen and all that kind of thing. People are still talking, having conversations. I'll never forget recently, it was around the holidays, I saw my friend Lori Morvan, who's an incredible blues guitarist, great band, incredible band. And there was this one group of people in the corner just like talking really loud. Everybody else is like getting into it, listening. And I just was like, I couldn't believe it. And it was distracting, actually, but it just brings up, a whole bunch of points here where, as musicians and as educators, it's just something to think about, for your students, but also I think for musicians too, we feel that need to always have to grab attention, in a modern type of way, as opposed to, what had happened. And I'm not saying to go backwards in time, but if you just think about how certain masters develop their solos, and stuff like that, and it doesn't have to be, like pedal to the metal right from the very beginning, because then you have nowhere to go, you know?
Yeah. That what you were saying really made me think about a friend of mine who's a wonderful trumpet player named Dennis Dotson. And Dennis used to play, he played in Buddy Rich's band, he played with Woody Herman, he's a featured soloist in Woody's band for a number of years. And he lived in New York and he was roommates with Joe Lovano when they were in the band together. And
Oh,
um, at the time when he was living in New York was when Dexter Gordon came back to the United States and he recorded his album Homecoming. And they played at Village Vanguard for, I don't know, at least a week. And I think he went almost every night
oh wow.
to hear the band play. And Dennis is a spectacular musician. And I remember him telling me, he said, he said, when they would first start, they didn't sound very good. He said it was like they'd come out there and he didn't mean it like they didn't play their instruments well or anything like that. He said it just sounded like they were kind of like warming up on
Okay.
stage, like not firing on all cylinders. But then as the set would progress, like it just became beautiful, magical. They allowed the music to unfold rather than forcing it to happen. And I think about that statement and that visual a lot. It's like, wow, we're so concerned. I mean, think about that for a second. To me, that also just says how the ego is not present in that way of producing music. Whereas the way that we're focused now, everything is ego driven.
Yeah.
Music is not about music. It's about music. It's not about us. It's about music coming through us and sharing it with others and sharing it just with the universe, not not about us. We're the channel
Yeah,
that
with a conduit. Yeah. And okay. And so this totally goes back to the way that you trained yourself and you think about it, right? Because, again, training yourself by ear and then learning how to get deeper and deeper into the music, right? And coming up with ways to get to that stream of consciousness, you know, in terms of your playing and in terms of helping your students. Um, yeah, this definitely goes back to that for sure. And let's go back down this route for a second. So let's talk about the Etude book. So the we kind of hit upon like the inspiration for it. I mean, you've had this kind of sort of on the shelf for a number of years, and this is a technique that you use for yourself and with students and all that kind of thing. What inspired you to put it out now, or I should say in the fall of 2023?
So, I've seen a lot of other people putting out books, and I thought, gosh, I have more than enough content already, sitting there to put out a book. And I've had people that know that I had this material that were telling me, why don't you put this out in a book form? And I had a student who he finished his master's degree up at NYU. And he continued to study with me online while he was at NYU. So he was studying with Lenny Pickett and Dave Liebman up there, but at the same time he was studying with them, he continued to work with me. And I asked him, because I have not gotten, technically savvy with Sibelius or Finale. I still do things by hand, and all these things were by hand. And I asked him if he would be interested in, helping me put the book together. And I said, in exchange, I'll give you, I'll teach you for the summer.
Wow.
And wouldn't you know, I mean, he went like above and beyond. His name's Millard Stewart. I acknowledge him at the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
And not only did he, typeset the book, but he also transcribed. I played some improvisations on tunes in the studio when we recorded the etudes, and he transcribed some of my solos, like three or four of them, and included them.
Yeah, I noticed
And
that.
that was important to me because I wanted people to be able to see like me improvising next to an etude. If like, does it sound like there's a connection? I mean, you can draw your own conclusions as you listen to it. And I didn't go into it any deeper than that, other than just putting them out there. Um, but I'm trying. What was? Can you tell me your question again? I've lost
No,
my own direction here.
no, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, we're talking about the inspiration for releasing the book, and so you had the
Yes.
material. Yeah.
Well, the other thing that was an inspiration for me to do that is that Eastman Saxophones. I've been working with them for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. When they were developing the Rue St. George tenor, they gave me a prototype of the instrument, and I played it, and I was giving them feedback on it. And then also when they developed the new 52nd Street horn with Bob Mincer, they also gave me, there were two prototypes, I think, and Bob had one and I had the other. I
Oh,
still have
okay.
it sitting here. So I used that horn to record the book. But Eastman, what an incredible company. They have been so
Yes.
great to me. And they have a studio, a small studio, but they have a production facility. They've got a crew that does video, audio and video.
Oh,
And, with the new instrument coming out, I spoke to Ryan Richmond, who's a personal friend, and I just said, Ryan, I've got this book that I want to do, and you're launching this new instrument. I said, what if I came over and I recorded these etudes at Eastman and, you know, do that on the new instrument? And he is like, well, sure. So, I mean, they did the project. I mean, the audio and the video, I mean, it would have set me back a lot to do all that. And they funded that project.
wow.
And I'm just so, so, so thankful and appreciative of Eastman and Ryan and everybody over there, Ralph Torres. And I mean, they're all great, great people. And, we recorded it in one day. I hired a killer rhythm section. I had Larry Kuntz on guitar and Ed Livingston on bass and Joe LaBarbera on drums. And I went into an isolation booth and I recorded all 14 etudes in 5 hours.
Wow.
And then I went back and I did some editing to get
Wow.
things, the way I wanted it to be. But um, so it was kind of like a perfect storm of all these things coming together, having worked with Eastman and having my student Millard help to prepare the book. And then once it got going, it's like, I got to get this done because I am someone who likes to complete things. And I think it had been bothering me that this book had been sitting and I hadn't completed it, and I just really wanted it to see the light of day. So um, that's
Yeah.
that's what led to it.
No, this is great. And I'm going to be diving into some of the things that you said in a minute. But in terms of the book, so, and thank you for sending me a copy. And I was going through it and I was curious about, oh, improvisation starts here. And I'm thinking, wait, hold on. It's an etude. I was thinking that he is improvising, but I'm glad you explained that because I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, it's not as clear in the book as it should be. So it only and I'll tell you what, Donna, when I was in the studio, before I went into the studio, I didn't know what I was going to do. Because I didn't even know, I never intended some of these things to be played with anybody.
Oh,
Uh, they were studies, it was like something to practice, something to work on. And then here I find myself in a studio with a great rhythm section, like tracking some of this stuff. I thought, wow, this is crazy. But I knew I wanted to improvise on the session, and I wanted to include that, and it just helped to kind of bring it all full circle. And I had never seen that in a book, in any etude books that people were putting out, where they would kind of juxtapose improvisation with, a written component. So I am going to be doing a volume two, and the
fantastic.
volume two will be on alto.
Ah,
So, and I'm not going to transpose, I'm not going to put this book out as an E flat book or anything like that. It's only B flat, because I wrote it from the standpoint of playing it on a tenor. I heard it, so like I wrote those things as I heard them. So I'm going to write the alto book as I hear them on alto and put that out. And it'll be exclusively, alto or baritone, of course. But some of them, as you know, depending upon someone's ability, they might. There's a lot of altissimo. I use altissimo a lot in my playing, so
yeah.
it could be really difficult to play on soprano, or on baritone or something like that. And also, I didn't want to transpose it because I thought then it's almost like looking at the Omni book, in B flat. It just doesn't sound right. It's like I didn't want to, I'd have to change octaves in places and edit it to make it work, and it would sound different. So I want to write it from the standpoint of the instrument that I intend to play it on, or that I intend anyone else to play it on.
And again, it's the same thing, stream of consciousness. I mean, such a great title. Really, really captures it, you know. Okay, so that answered a couple of questions with that. And I was just thinking to myself, though, I'm really glad that you did make recordings because I think this goes back to, again, the way you taught yourself and jazz as an aural, AURAL, an aural art. And so, having people hear these etudes and perhaps also giving them the opportunity, if they wanted to try to learn them by ear, if you think about it.
This is what's so wonderful about books, and I like to leave things open-ended. So that's one option. I don't put any articulations in there. I feel like that's very personal. That's up to the student. I think about how I struggled with that in my own learning. Like, how in the hell does, uh, Sonny Stitt, tongue so cleanly, and as great as Sonny Stitt is, like Tubby Hayes, like who was a player that maybe a lot of people don't know as well, he was a British saxophonist. That guy could single tongue eighth notes at 300 and it sounds like they're slurred, like just
Crazy.
unbelievable articulation. And so I left those kinds of things out, but I feel like that's what books, you can dive into a book like that. You could, or you not use the book, you could listen to it, you could learn it by ear, or you could play phrases out of the book and learn phrases in different keys. extract concepts from the book, understanding that I'm targeting melody notes and maybe write your own etude or try to focus on improvisation, targeting melody notes in the way that I did it in the etude. Um, yeah, it's really kind of limitless, what you can do with something like that. But I also know that a lot of people end up getting books. I've had adults and some younger students that get books and they don't even scratch the surface with it. So you only get out of it what you put in, right?
Be like
So
college. Yeah.
yeah, so if someone's really motivated, I'm sure they would, take the time to do some of these other things and experiment with it, and hopefully it ends up having a life that goes on beyond mine, and students use it in the future.
Yeah, and with this book, it's a great book, really. And what I found really just fascinating, yeah, your way to collect not collect, to connect melodies and stuff like that is very melodic playing, and it wasn't like you were playing scales all the time. It's not that. Um, you moved around the chord tones, you moved around the chord scale tones. There are substitutions in there. There are spots where you're imposing extensions, half whole diminished scales over 5/7 chords, where they're not going to minor, they're going to a major seven. Excuse me. Different types of ideas going on there. And then I absolutely noticed the use of going up into the altissimo, not just altissimo A, you're hitting A sharps, you're hitting C sharps. It's not just your standard, let's hit the money note A, and then be done with it.
Right.
So it does require some technique. I mean, for those people, not to turn people off, that don't have altissimo, because you could always read it down the octave. But I do think one of the biggest strengths, what I love being a teacher and a performer, but especially teaching, I love resources where students can hear the etudes, can hear, whatever they're working on, because you can't convey everything. I remember there was one etude you did. I don't know if it was on All of Me or one of the ones where it was complex rhythms. It was half note,
Oh, yeah.
um,
All of me, yeah, I
yeah,
have it
half
here.
note triplets. Yeah,
Yeah, it starts. I mean, that's pretty convoluted, I know. And even
that was tough
when we recorded it in the studio, it was like it took a minute to kind of put it together.
to
And
feel
we
that. Yeah,
and we it took us a minute to kind of determine how are we going to make this work? Because I didn't create arrangements of these. Like I said, I didn't write these with the intention of playing them with people. And uh, um, along those lines, what really got me was when after we did some of it, the guys in the group were like, "Well, you should play this. Like let's do a gig and play these." And I was like, "Really? You mean
yeah.
play some of these things?" I was like, "Sure. Play it like a tune."
Yeah, well, yeah, because it is. It absolutely is, and yeah, absolutely. Why not? And I just realized something too. So when you went to the studios, I mean, I guess you gave them the tunes, but that's right, you didn't have arrangements. How did you all
We
work
did
that?
it well. I hired some of the best musicians in LA
Yeah.
and who I admired and had never worked with before. And wouldn't you know that the three people that I called ended up being three people that work together as a trio often.
Ah,
So it's like they just had this simpatico, a relationship about them, and I felt like immediately I was just welcomed in, and we worked on this and created arrangements. I mean, Larry Kuntz is a brilliant guitarist, and he on some of these, he kind of created little accompaniment, like varied the harmonies a little bit and was accenting certain parts of the line. He was reading the lines when I came in there. He was playing the lines himself. I gave them concert pitch copies so they could look at them.
okay.
And not only that, Joe LaBarbera, a brilliant drummer, it was in Bill Evans's last trio, and Joe is like looking at these lines and he's orchestrating them as he's playing.
Wow.
So, I mean, it was very much like a real jazz session, even though here we're doing something that's educational, it felt like a record date. Um, and I was just that also made me even more inspired, and I wanted to like play more. I wanted to, stretch out on some tunes, and ended up, improvising on more tunes than I thought I might. Um, so it was
Yeah,
fun.
well, your technique is crazy good. I mean, really, really good. And just again, it's not we're not just talking notes, we're not just talking range, but there's definitely like variety of rhythms. There are motifs that are developed, and in such a melodic way too. So hats off. I mean, and when you said that you felt it was a jazz session, yeah, thinking about it and watching the videos, that are available on YouTube, and we'll have links, by the way, people, in the show notes for this, and as well as a link to buy. But yeah, you would think that you were just recording a session, which you were, but your thought process was, okay, I'm doing this for the book, but little did you realize that actually, yeah, you could absolutely perform these.
It was one of the most draining sessions I've ever done. I will tell you that. Because not in any reason for the band. I mean, the band was like unbelievably good and supportive, but it just took so much mental energy putting it all together. And I think I was kind of in my own head in recording it, because I wanted it to just to go down immediate. And a lot of those things that we just ended up doing like one take, or we did like a rehearsal of it and did one take.
Wow.
So a couple of them I definitely, wanted to go back so that I could kind of clean them up. And so there's some a little inconsistencies in some of the video. I ended up doing it when I came back to Houston, and I went into a studio and patched in some parts just to get it right. And a great engineer here, Brian Baker, managed to make it sound, you don't even hear, it's seamless. It's like the sound is just the same. Um, but I'm excited about the next, going on to the next book and doing that, and hope that this thing will kind of have a life of its own, and people will check it out. And um, I certainly don't expect to get rich off of things like this, but what I'm more interested in is hearing how other people practice these, and maybe people post their own videos, playing the etudes, or, ideas that they have about it, um, posting commentary. I've been giving copies to various pros that I know, trying to, get some feedback from them, but also if they have students that are interested in it, to pass on my information.
Yeah, I just thought of something for you. That is a great idea. And what you could have, like, develop a hashtag. Like, the hashtag could be streams, or, whatever, what I'm saying? Hashtag streams. And, they post like, the etude, but then the spots where there's improvisation, they're adding their own, and that
That's
would be cool.
great. Yeah. Those are all, I mean, I welcome all those. I also thought about starting like a Facebook page for it,
Oh, it's a great
so
idea.
people could, post their videos there, comments, ask questions, all that kind of stuff. And once the next volume comes out, then there will be a place for that too, because it'll be the same title. It'll just be volume two,
Right.
the E flat book.
Yeah, and again, I was going to ask you. I saw volume one and said, okay, there has to be a volume two coming out, which is great. And what's interesting too, what you said before, this first volume is tenor, it's B flat based, and again, the analogy, the omnibook, it's best played on an E flat instrument because that's, Charlie Parker played the alto on many of those songs, all those songs, and that's where it's felt the best. That's where it sounds the best. And, as a B flat instrumentalist playing the omnibook, that's not, you got to jump octaves here and there, and it's not comfortable. It just doesn't sit right. While the ideas are amazing, it just doesn't sit right. But your idea of kind of thinking that, okay, this is what I came up with, my stream of consciousness, my, writing these etudes, but writing these etudes as a stream of consciousness. And then I'm improvising, and, I've developed my improvisation based off of years of hearing and diving into things and all that kind of stuff. And I'm hearing what I want to play, and it's coming out. It makes total sense. And I could see you having, yeah, definitely. I'm going to encourage you live on this podcast, definitely set up that Facebook page and have your students help to share it when you share this with professionals, say, by the way, here's a Facebook page, encourage your students to post their videos there, and their own improvisations, that
Yeah.
would be really interesting.
Yeah, agreed. A challenge accepted.
Okay, awesome.
I'll do it.
Awesome. Now, one of the other things, two things I wanted to get into. Let me go down this track. So Eastman, yeah, Eastman, Ryan Richmond, great people. I've interviewed Ryan for the podcast a few times, and the last time was at the NAMM show. The most recent NAMM show. The NAMM show's coming up again January 2024, but that was in 2023 in June. That was when the new Eastman 852, the one designed with like Bob Mintzer and yourself with the prototypes. Wow, what a horn. Wow,
Yeah,
what a horn. Oh my God.
it's a wonderful instrument.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit because that Eastman makes great horns, but that horn is really special. What do you feel makes that iteration of the 52nd Street theme, so to speak, stand out?
Well, I mean, since I played the Rue St. George when it was being developed, the key work on the Rue St. George is incredible. The key work on that was designed with Haynes Flute Company, which Eastman bought them, and one of their primary people at Haynes redesigned the key work for the instrument. I mean, the keys are shaped differently, the side keys are different, the spatula keys, the palm keys. It doesn't have pearls on it. It uses these silver touches that are kind of like a flute. And then there are a lot of things that most people don't even notice, like the wide feet on the paddles that make the action really quiet and light. They married that action with the 52nd Street horn. So it's got that kind of broader sound, of the 52nd Street to me sounds more like it's very close to a con. And I play cons a lot too. I have a 1941 con 30M that I use a lot because I just love the tone of it. But the Eastman just stands toe to toe with that. It's a modern instrument that has that broad tone. So to have that beautiful light ergonomic action married with an instrument that's got that broad sound, it's really great. And I know that the neck is a key component of the instrument, and Mintzer in particular, I know that the M neck is the one that Mintzer kind of settled upon, and that's the one that I use. And I think Ryan told me that Bob said something about it just feels like, the notes just kind of fall out of it when you play. And it does have that free blowing character to it. Without being, like super spread. It has a nice core to the sound. The intonation is great. I
Yeah.
mean, to me, there's nothing to not like about the horn. Um, it's a beautiful looking instrument too, when you look at it. Um, it's what they have been doing over there is incredible. And I don't know if I can tell you that I'm going to NAMM in January, and they got something else up their sleeve right now.
Oh.
Uh, and they've been working with Haynes, and they're making a handmade horn.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's going to be an artist series instrument. So I'm sorry, Ryan, if I wasn't supposed to say something. I certainly didn't mean that, but he told me he insisted. He said, make sure you bring your alto set up. And I was like, okay. So I think they're starting with an alto, and I think that they've worked with Haynes to create this instrument like from the ground up.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm really excited to see what that's going to be like. They've been working on it for a while, and it will be at NAMM.
That's
So,
awesome. I'll
yeah.
see you there. I'll be at NAMM and I
Oh,
will be, yes, in fact, yeah, what we'll do is we'll catch up and then I record the podcast from there. So, yeah, I can definitely be at that booth,
yeah, yeah.
catching
I'll
that.
only, I'll probably be there just on Friday. I'm like flying in on Thursday. And I might
Okay,
be there a little bit on Saturday morning, but I'm flying in Thursday night, be there all day Friday, a little bit on Saturday, and fly home.
got it.
My oldest daughter is pregnant. I'm about to be a grandfather, so
Oh, awesome.
I can't be gone too long.
No, you can't. No, for sure. Great news all around. That's great. So now one more thing I wanted to hit up, and you alluded to this before. You spent a summer transcribing Sonny Stitt, 23 or so solos. You did your doctoral dissertation on Sonny Stitt. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, sure. I'd love to. And for anyone who's interested, I have it posted on my website for free.
Oh,
The
wow.
dissertation is available for download. And to this day, I think it's the only serious document, like when I wrote that, there was not one primary source on Sonny Stitt at all.
Wow.
I interviewed people firsthand. I interviewed his widow. I interviewed his daughter. I interviewed Barry Harris on the phone twice. Barry was so generous with his time. I think I I think I ended up talking to him. I filled two 90-minute cassettes.
Wow.
I still have, I want to digitize all that and upload it at some point. Red Holloway, I interviewed Red Holloway, great saxophonist who toured with Sonny towards the end of his life. Um, Keeter Betts, a great bassist who lived in the DC area. Um, so it was really a passion of mine, to pursue that. And Sonny Sonny was one of the most, if not the most recorded saxophonist in history in jazz. I think he did over 100 albums as a leader.
Wow.
Uh, and part of that was he worked with like all these different labels and would do one-offs. And I think his nickname was the Lone Wolf. He worked like as a, you know, horn man for hire. He had certain people that he worked with. He did have a band that he worked with for a period of time, with Billy James on drums and Don Patterson on organ. It was an incredible group. But that experience, doing all those interviews, and this was in the late 90s when I did it. So I was on the phone, just tracking people down was like nearly impossible.
Yeah.
I ended up getting in touch with Pamela Stitt through her attorney because I was trying to publish a book of transcriptions. And this is about the time I think that Greg Fishman was putting out like his Stan Getz book and things like that. And I contacted Hal Leonard and they were interested, but they said I had to get permission. And I ended up speaking to her attorney and then ended up getting in touch with Pam directly. And then shortly thereafter, I was working on my dissertation and I ended up going to her house. She picked me up at the train station in Washington, D.C., brought me back to her home and served me lunch.
Wow.
And I walked downstairs into the basement in what was a music room and saw all of the records and things that Sonny had done and pictures. And it was really such an amazing experience.
Oh, there's no question about that. Um,
And I,
so
and I kicked myself over and over for not having a camera. I didn't take pictures of anything. I just have the memory.
yeah, well, you were in the moment and you were talking mid 90s, right? So it's not like we're so, nowadays it's like you can't go anywhere without your phone. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah. Like easy, everyone picks, you take a picture. It's like, what's the big deal? You got a camera in your pocket.
yeah, back then, no one carried cameras around. So, give yourself some slack there for sure. I'm curious, do you have any thoughts um of I guess publishing your dissertation as a book?
Well, it's funny you say that too, because his daughter, Katia, she works for the Pacifica radio station in DC. And she does they do all kinds of music, but she does a birthday tribute to her dad. And she had me on as a guest.
Oh, that's cool.
And she just this last year, she had me on as a guest, and she hadn't even seen the dissertation. I don't know what transpired after, life, things are busy. I ended up sending her the dissertation and she was like, well, you have to put out a book on my dad because no one's done that, you
Yeah.
know? And I have thought about it. I may do it, but it's just such a big undertaking. Yes, I have a lot of work done. Um, And I might do something. I've been thinking more along the lines of having a part of my website kind of dedicated to Sonny and posting like these interviews and things like that. And then maybe even, who knows, once I get into it, maybe I would get inspired again and dive back into it. But I was really in this position as I was doing the dissertation. One of my committee members is a great author and historian, and wrote kind of like a definitive book on Gershwin and Aaron Copland. And he was telling me I needed to put it out as a book. He even quoted my dissertation in his Gershwin book because
Oh.
I have a chapter that's dedicated to I Got Rhythm.
Mm.
And I kind of like talk about the importance of the form and lay out all the different, a lot of different chord substitutions and things like that because I think the book deals with, or the dissertation, if I remember correctly, it's all in, out of all the solos I did several rhythm changes solos in different periods of his career and did like a comparison contrast of how his style evolved. And they're all tenor solos, not alto.
Okay.
So I talk specifically about his approach to tenor and kind of dig into that. And Red Holloway had some really great comments about that, because he told me directly, he said, Sonny said that the alto was for singing and the tenor is for punching.
Wow.
That's how that's how Red explained it. And yeah, Red was a beautiful soul too. You wouldn't you know, I spent all this time talking to Red on the phone, and he ended up coming to Houston to play, and he invited me to his gig and asked me to bring my horn, and I played the whole night with him.
That's
And I
awesome.
don't think he even knew if I played or how I played. I mean, of course he knew I played, but he didn't know anything. But he invited me to this gig, and I ended up playing the whole night with him. Incredible experience. It was really great
That's
just
awesome.
to meet him that way, making music.
That's awesome. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that are, you know, you have this book that's out right now, and then now volume two is brewing. You've had a number of people saying to you, "Wow, you did this dissertation on Sonny Stitt. There was no source material. You had to find it, right? And, in order to create this dissertation, and, you have people referring to it. You have a bunch of people saying, yeah, you know what, make this into a book. So a lot of things, I can see a lot of things happening in your future,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, the book might be something I shelved the book idea because I really wanted to play. And
Yeah.
also I was in this position of I had spent so much time, I was so intimately connected to his playing. I remember when I went to UNT and was auditioning for lab bands and doing like the improvisation auditions, everyone was talking about how I sounded like Sonny Stitt.
Mm,
And you know, and on one hand, it was like, I certainly appreciated that, but that's not who I want to be.
right.
And that was a phase, that was a period to go through to learn. So I think for me, it was like I wanted to shelve the idea of even dealing with Sonny, and I need to focus on me as a player and developing my approach, my playing, my sound, as influenced by Stitt and other great artists. Um, Now I'm in a different stage of my life. Now I think I could go back and I can look at that and listen to that and do it kind of from afar,
Yeah.
uh, and not have it have that kind of influence on me.
That brings up a great, mini topic in a sense that, a lot of people that I've been speaking to for the podcast were talking about the influence of Michael Brecker and how, like, in at Berkeley, during the late 70s, early 80s, like it sounded like a whole bunch of Brecker clones in the practice room and stuff like that. And, for some people, they were like it. They realized, I can't do this. I can't keep doing this because I'll never be me, you know. And
Yeah.
here you are talking about Sonny Stitt, and the same thing was happening to you. So what kind of advice do you have for people that may really admire one particular player, how far do they go, when it comes to transcribing? Like, how do they approach that?
That's a wonderful question. Um, I I had the great fortune to know Michael Brecker and play with him. I've got a recording of he and I playing together. And Michael was a huge influence on me as well. And I transcribed Michael a lot, and I went through that kind of a phase myself. And my second record I recorded with Randy. Randy played trumpet on it. And I remember touring, I was touring with Randy when Michael was ill. And I remember Michael calling Randy and talking to him, and we were on tour, and we're in the car together, and he told Michael that we were on tour together, and he's like, "Oh, let me talk to Woody." And I didn't even think he would remember me, because it was like I played with him and spent time with him, but he was such a beautiful person, such down to earth and supportive and grounded, and for me, like just a great influence beyond being an amazing, well, one of the most important saxophonists of time, an
Yeah.
extension of the language from Coltrane. Um, I think everyone has to answer that for themselves in terms of where it ends. Another great artist who impacted me deeply was David Liebman.
Mm.
And I spent time with David Liebman around the time that I had finished my dissertation. And he was very supportive and encouraged me and invited me to play with him. And I'll never forget this. After we were done playing, I mean, he invited me to play. I played this club date with him. He used my tenor and my mouthpiece because he didn't even have a mouthpiece with him. He brought his soprano, and he got a new soprano and didn't have his tenor mouthpiece. And I played at the time I was playing on like a nice Florida Link, and he loved that. And he played it, and then he wanted to hear me play it. And he was like, "Why don't you come play the gig with me tonight?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I mean, we're like playing this gig, like swapping the horn back and forth, and he's playing soprano, and we played like a 20-minute or 30-minute version of impressions with a drummer. It was amazing. And then he invited me to the master class that he did, and I played on stage with him. And then he even asked me to play the concert. And I felt horrible. I had to decline because I had a gig. And the next day I'm like hanging out with him, and he said, "Do you mind if I offer you some advice?" And I was like, "Please do, you know. And he talked to me about developing as an artist. And he talked to me about sifting through my influences and really determining like who I was as a player. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I remember vividly after that, spending a huge amount of time doing, I would say, a 2 to 3 year period of playing like free, like improvising freely. I spent hours doing that. Sometimes I would record myself doing it. Um, and when I say play freely, this was something that Tim Higgins had a big influence on me in this manner. Because I remember I brought him in as a guest when I was teaching at HSPVA, and he did a demonstration doing free playing, and he talked about he literally just playing one note and then hearing the next note that you're going to
Mm.
play. And I took that to heart, and I spent time practicing and trying to hear the next note that I was going to play and not play pat licks or phrases that I had worked out. I was trying to abandon or shelve these things that I had worked on and try to get to the root of who I was as a musician. And that's really how my first album came to be. I ended up writing songs from some of the material came from ideas that I created in my free playing. And it influenced the way that I improvised. It made me not, it really made me think about what I'm playing in the context of it, like, okay, am I playing this because this is something that just fits under my hands, or am I playing it because I hear it? So I guess that also kind of comes back to things like this book. The book maybe indirectly was an outgrowth of that, of like continuing to, because some of those etudes might have even, one or two of them might have been written around that time. I don't even know. I don't know the exact dates. Um, but to answer your question, I think every student, we're all students. I'm speaking of myself. Every student needs to answer that question for themselves. And I believe we're in a bit of I think an existential crisis in that people spend so much time transcribing and posting videos of them, doing this transcription, that transcription. And while that's great, that's a study, that's something that we do to learn, that's not the end goal, to just imitate someone that we hear. The masters all played what they heard. They they were adamant about playing the way they play. All the way back to the early artists, like you hear stories in some of these oral histories about like Buddy Bolden and players like that who would like put a handkerchief over their hands so that people couldn't see the fingerings that they're using. And now, I mean, think about early jazz, and I'll include swing and even the bebop period. Every player has such a unique sound and approach on their instruments. Like you can identify them before they even improvise.
Mm.
Now, I don't know that I could identify most players when I hear them. I might be able to identify influences, but I don't hear someone stand out so much. I mean, I can hear Ben Webster play a melody, and that I don't have to hear him do anything else. And I know it's Ben Webster from his tone, the attack, the phrasing. There is so much there. And I think we have left a lot of that to the side in pursuit of developing technique and how fast we can play and cool harmonic ideas or patterns and while those things are great for developing our ears and our approach, I think that sometimes that can also be a hindrance. It can get in the way and keep us from just expressing.
And also the word originality comes to mind too. It's originality being sacrificed for you know, flashiness.
Yeah. I mean, a term that I like to use a lot with many players I hear, and I'm not trying to put people down at all because I think there's people that are out there that play more saxophone than I do, but I hear a homogeneousness about the way people play. It's like the music ends up sounding the same. The playing sounds the same. It's like, where is the originality? I I I believe that that's what jazz is supposed to be about. The players that I admire and have admired in the past were all very original. And to me, I want to be original. I want to be me.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that's a great way to end this podcast. And before we go, though, tell people where they can find you, your website, Facebook, Instagram.
Sure, sure. So my website is just woodywitt.com. You can purchase the Streams of Consciousness book there. And as I mentioned, you can also get the Stitt dissertation there. I do intend to do a lot more with the website. It's an incredible website. It's hosted by WordPress. The founder of WordPress, Matt Mullenweg, is a former student of mine.
Wow.
He created my first website.
Wow.
Yeah, it's nice to know people like
Yes,
that.
it is.
Really nice to know people like that. So that's my website. Actually, all my social media links and stuff are on the website. You can go there. But if you type in Woody Witt, it'll come up. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I have a YouTube channel that I'm working towards building more and more, starting to add content. I want to be more committed to that. I think I just passed 400 followers, so I'll
Awesome.
keep working.
Yeah, but you know what? Listen, the theme of this, couple of themes. Number one, again, the title of your book, Streams of Consciousness, the Etude book, just fits your life. It fits the way that you have taught yourself and stuff. And but also the element in there of, digging into music and digging into everything that you're doing and, really just diving deep and getting the most out of it. That's so important. But the other thing too that we talked about is it doesn't have to be pedal to the metal right from the very beginning. It's the development. It's a development of things. And when you have patience, yeah, when you have patience and you can be in the moment, then beautiful things can develop.
I like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it was so great meeting you. So great having you on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Donna. It was wonderful.